All right, get hype, you jerks. We got a brand new Yahoo board as of this morning. What the hell is today? Tuesday? Yeah, it's Tuesday, August 27th. It's Yahoo board edition number 2. And it happened a bit later than we expected, like a solid 9 days, I think, later than expected. The first board lasted for 19 days. That's way longer than we thought it was going to kick. But it was dragged out, kicking and screaming, and now we got a brand new board up. And today we will start our new exploration because, and I say this quite genuinely, Yahoo, this board is a lot better than the last one. They are much, much closer. The values are tighter. The busts are closer to where they belong. Names bounced up, some bounced down, but by and large, like, I'm getting attacked by a moth early show here again. I don't know what's going on. I think there's an issue. Maybe it's in this golf bag over here. Every once, like one every 3 days, a little tiny moth comes out. By and large, more often than not everything is perfect, but they did get better. Which means the values are harder to find, and we need to find them. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Bespris. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Bespris, DanBesbris. When we do mock drafts, we put the call out on Twitter. Reason number 1 to follow me over there. We'll also have a lot of content on social media. You can also follow our network feed at Old Man Squad. That's where all the podcasts get posted. That's where our other hosts are able to interact. It's where those shows get posted. Please do give that a follow, and it will follow you back. And I ask you again, before we dive in, face first, whammo, face first right into the rock that is today's show. Please click that thumbs up button on YouTube. Please, 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 pretty please, and subscribe if you like what we've been doing here on the Old Man Squad. And if you have a moment, Apple, Spotify in particular, please drop that 5-star review. The new board is different than the old board. The new board is different than the old board, with the exception of numbers 1 through 4, number 8, number 11, and that's it, I believe, in the top 25. Everything else is different. Those names that stayed the same are Victor Wembanyama, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jason Tatum, and Trae Young. Everybody else moved. Which is not that surprising because as you move down the board, it's just easier to bounce from place to place, and there's more guys that can move around you. What is kind of fun, and we'll just start at the top. We're going to go through today's show one by one. I'll tell you the guys that I like and the guys I don't like as we work our way through, especially now that they're in a new spot. So some of that information actually changes from the last time we did this top 25 edition of the show. Wemby, Jokic, Luka, and Shai, top 4. The fact that they stayed the same means my feelings pretty much stay the same, which is that I prefer Jokic over Wemby at the top of the board. And you guys can yell at me all you want. It's not like I don't like Wembanyama. He is my number 2. But I'm still a Jokic man. It's probably because in my heart of hearts, I remain a roto guy first. I love the fact that Jokic is very good at points and steals out of the big man spot. He is hyper elite in rebounds, assists, and field goal percent. He is good at free throws. He is fine at blocks. He's really only a negative in 3-pointers, which again, 1.1 out of a center. I think we can all live with that. And it's just such an incredible foundational piece for your team. You can build in so many directions. Some people are like, I like to go Wemby, and then I just immediately punt field goal percent because, odds are field goal percent maybe gets a little bit better. Maybe you don't have to punt it, blah, blah, blah. Like, lots tied up in blocks. He's going to be really good. I mean, that's why he's the number 2. But with Jokic or Wemby, you don't know who's coming back to you at pick 23, 24, 25, 26. You don't know who's going to still be on the board. The reason I like Jokic is it just gives you more avenues you can go. You can lead into being bad at 3-pointers. You could lean into being good at boards or assists or percentages or steals. If you take a scorer, it helps. I mean, you could do it with Wemby also. But with Victor, who's also, by the way, going to be very good in steals this year because his arms are 9,000 feet long, you kind of have to make sure your blocks stay good. Rebounds is a hyper elite category. He probably gets pretty good in scoring. I don't know that he gets much beyond what Jokic did this last year at 26. That's a pretty big number. Threes are going to be pretty good, I would think. So you have these avenues, but there's just more options with Jokic. And that's why I prefer him over Wemby, because you just like whatever players are left, you can kind of pick any of them, whatever you like best in the second and third round. And suddenly you just have a magically great team build. I don't want to spend too much time on the top 4. So very quickly, Luka Doncic at 3 is the consensus 3. Obviously fits the head-to-head mold better because he is hyper elite in scoring, threes, boards, assists, and pretty damn good in steals. He gives you those 5 foundational categories. He's fine in the percentages now, much better than he used to be. But there is, the negative. Free throws a negative. Turnovers are a huge negative. Luka's obviously amazing in 8 category leagues and in a lot of head-to-head spots. You go that direction. The problem with Luka right now is since the last time we did one of these top 25 shows, his playoff calendar came out and he has a 2-game week in there. In Yahoo public leagues, it's the first week of the playoffs, so you could get knocked out early. If you're ending a few weeks early, he might be your finals. So that is a reason to maybe overlook him. The problem, of course, is that Shai, who was also amazing last year, doesn't have as many foundational categories that are easy to build on the head-to-head side. He has just as many for Roto, because Shai is also very, very good in scoring. Not quite Luka level, but excellent. Excellent in steals, although that was a number that came down partway through the year, so just keep that in the back of your head. And he's terrific in both percentages, which is great. 4 awesome categories for Roto building or head-to-head building, but in head-to-head, building on the percentages, making those your focal point with your first-round pick is troubling. It's nice if those are a byproduct of having a very good first-round pick, but they don't have to be the focal point. And frankly, with free throws being as the variance in those as much as they are, I would argue more than field goal because guys just take more field goal attempts over the course of the week, so it's harder for that to bounce around. And then, Dan, you were just saying how much you love Nikola Jokic is awesome at field goal percent. He is so good at field goal percent that the down weeks for Jokic, you still have a really good shot to win that category where, argue that with Shai at 53.5%, you could have a down week in there and he doesn't carry you quite the same way. Free throws do, and that's fine. So we can call free throws a really nice positive and one that doesn't fluctuate as much for Shai, and steals and points, but that's still really only 3 head-to-head foundational categories, where Luka has 4 or 5. But Shai is still the obvious choice at 4 for head-to-head. You could, again, possibly argue him at 3 for Roto, 3 for head-to-head if you're worried about the playoff schedule. But let's move on and let's start talking about these other guys one by one. Those that have been listening to the show throughout our draft season prep so far, you know how I feel about Tyrese Halliburton. And he has moved up the board. Halliburton from 6 to 5. An intriguing twist as he flip-flops with Giannis Antetokounmpo, who was 5, and now he's number 6. I already was not overly enthusiastic about Halliburton in the 6 hole, so it goes to figure that I'm also not as overly enthusiastic about Halliburton in the 5 hole. And it's not because I think Halliburton's going to be that, 20 some odd ranked guy that he was when he was sort of half playing. Remember when they were dealing with the hamstring stuff? It's just that I think Halliburton is probably the guy that was healthy, quote unquote, healthy Halliburton, but with Pascal Siakam soaking up some of the usage that nobody was soaking in the beginning of the year. Halliburton down the stretch last season got his minutes back up to 32. He averaged 18 and 9 with 2.6 defensive stats, 2.7 threes, 46-84 splits, which again, you could see those come up a little bit. That was good enough for number 11 in a limited sample size. But, some guys were out that weren't. And like Kawhi Leonard was number 18 over that stretch for reasons we don't really fully understand. Little things happen. Little things here and there where guys bounced up, guys bounced down. I happen to think Halliburton is more like that range kind of guy. 9, 10, 11, 12 type per game dude. Maybe he has the durability you're looking for. Yeah, he didn't last year with the hamstring thing. But at 5, he's too early for me. I don't think that I want to spend my 5th pick on Halliburton. Giannis at 6 continues to make total sense if you're planning on punting free throws. And actually, Alex Rickling on this morning's show put it really nicely, which is there's no issue with taking Giannis in this range if you're punting free throws. In fact, you pretty much have to take him as soon as Shea is off the board if that's the path you're going to go. Because if you don't go Giannis, the guy that does is going to have a much better inside track to punting free throws than you do. But if you're not planning on punting free throws, then taking Giannis there doesn't make any sense because he's number 32 if you're considering free throws a competitive category. And if you're not, he's a top 5 kind of dude because he's hyper lead in points, boards, field goal percent. Those 3 things again. Pretty darn good in assists. Not Jokic level, but pretty good in steals, pretty good in blocks, and then doesn't shoot any 3-pointers. He's kind of like Jokic with a bad free throw number. That's Giannis. Giannis is Jokic who can't shoot free throws. From a fantasy standpoint, scores a little bit more, assists a little bit less. Everything else is pretty freaking close. Like, you can look at it if you just look at the punt free throw board. It goes Jokic, AD, Luka, Giannis. That's your top 4 in punt free throw mode. And the reason that Anthony Davis is ahead of Giannis is because he's got lower turnovers. But otherwise, like, look at the gap between Giannis and Jokic. Giannis +4 in points. They're separated by half a 3-pointer, 1 rebound, 2.5 assists, 0.2 steals, 0.2 blocks. Field goal impact, Giannis is higher. And then turnovers, Giannis is a little worse. But then there's free throws. Giannis, the worst impact free throw shooter in the NBA. Jokic, like, slightly above average. So Giannis is totally fine here. I'm comfortable with him going at 5, frankly, if you're punting free throws. If you're not, obviously, he doesn't belong on your target board. Joel Embiid slides up in the recent reiteration here to number 7 from number 9. I just did a show like 2 days ago where I was like, if Embiid falls to me at 9, I am absolutely taking him because I think he's going to play 60 ball games this year. And if you take him at 9 and he's number 1 or 2 per game, he beats that. Number 7 is a questionable play because you still have a couple of guys on the board that maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable with. Anthony Davis was going ahead of Joel Embiid before this readjustment, as was Jason Tatum. Perhaps we should talk about those 3 guys together now, because it looks like Halliburton is starting to distance himself above those guys, Giannis as well, in the punt mold. So do you go Embiid, do you go Tatum, or do you go Anthony Davis? There's an argument to be made for all 3. Jason Tatum is the young buck in this group, but his team did make a finals run and won it. They're the champs. So he played the longest season of anybody in this upper threshold. He went to the Olympics, even if he didn't play all that much in the ball games. There was a lot of traveling. There was a lot of basketball. There was a lot of practice. Embiid was also in the Olympics. Looked kind of slow and clunky. Anthony Davis was also in the Olympics. Looked quite spry, actually. Neither one of those 2 teams, Sixers or Lakers, made a super deep playoff run, so at least they had time to rest before the Olympics. Still, Embiid, dude looked very slow until the last 2 games. Then he kind of woke up a little bit, started to beat up on teams where the U.S. needed a little more offense. Good points can be made all around. No matter how you look at the numbers, you can kind of create the narrative that makes the most sense. Anthony Davis had 3 very bad health seasons in a row with the Lakers before a much better one this last year, which also, by the way, coincided with his highest minutes per game number since 2017 with the Pels. AD's been a Laker for 5 seasons. He's played in 85% of the games or more, 2 of those 5 seasons. And this is a bit of what I talked about at the end of our morning show today, which is how do you compare the health risk of Anthony Davis against the health risk of Joel Embiid? I'm not a big Jason Tatum fan this year. I think with Porzingis out, he has a chance to get back in that top 11, top 12 neighborhood. But I also think this might be the year that we see Tatum finally kind of miss a few ball games. Where last year he played in 74 out of 82. He's always in that 90% range. Deep finals run and Olympics. Dude's a little bit beat up right now. And emotionally, too, after not getting to play. Does that put a chip on his shoulder? I guess there's the possibility that that's how that situation rectifies itself. But, the Celtics are going to be really good. They're going to want to make another deep playoff run. They're going to have to pace themselves during the regular season. And so whatever extra stuff you think Tatum's going to get with Kristaps Porzingis out half the year, you have to temper that joy with, is he going to play fewer minutes? I think they'd like him to. 35.7, according to Basketball Monster last year, almost 36 minutes a game. Would they like him to play fewer games? I would imagine so. Jason Tatum is obviously the safe pick here because, again, youth is on his side. But it's hard for me not to pick Anthony Davis. Because I know, looking at the Embiid track record, go back the last few years, this season he missed 43 ball games. Previous year, 16. Before that, 14. That was his, true health year. 21 the year before that, 21 the year before that, 18 the year before that, 19 the year before that. Joel Embiid very consistently misses 15 to 20 ball games every year. Other than really 2 seasons where it got much, much worse. Anthony Davis is he will or he won't. This year, AD played over 90% of his team's games. In 2020, the bubble championship year, where the Lakers had a 3-month break, then played the bubble, then had a 2-month break and had to come back, Anthony Davis played 62 out of 72 Laker games that season, and they had an opportunity to go easy on him because they were boat racing the league during the regular season that year. But then he had no chance to recover. The 2020-2021 season was a disaster for AD. His body was just a mess. He had his worst field goal percent year of his career. Came back the following year after another short offseason. Remember, that was the one that the season started late and ended late on purpose and played only 40 games. The only recent season for AD where I look at it and I'm like, I don't like the way this went health-wise was not this season, but the previous one where he played in 56 games. And that was, I think, if I'm remembering the foot, that was the heel injury that knocked him out for 15 to 20 ball games. And then he kind of played through it the rest of the year. Last 2 years, AD has forced himself to play through the small stuff. I actually kind of like that. So once you get past Giannis at 5, I'm willing to lump Halliburton in with this next group. And I know I have Embiid flashed up on the screen, but we're also talking about Tatum and Anthony Davis. All of these faces are part of it. I would go AD. Then I'd probably go Halliburton because the assists are really hard to pass up. Then I'm probably going Embiid. And Tatum, I don't even know if I'm doing yet. Probably Tatum after that. So that would be 6, 7, 8, 9. That would put Tatum at 9. Although, as you look at the board now, and we'll scroll down along with everybody, as you look at the board, Kevin Durant at 10 makes a freaking compelling case to go over Jason Tatum, other than, again, he's older. Odds are Tatum probably plays more games than KD this year, and odds are they're probably within about 3 or 4 slots of each other on the per-game side, so Tatum is probably the pick there. But KD is definitely the one right after it. So KD at 10 actually makes a ton of sense. 11 remains Trae Young. Somehow, everybody's shifting all around on either side of him, but Trae Young stayed exactly where he was, and this is fine. He makes no real sense here if you are not punting the things he's whack at. Trae Young is whack at field goal percent and turnovers, although, for turnovers in the first round, not a huge deal. Trae Young is a punt field goal guy. He's going to be very strong in points, threes, and assists, and free throws, which for head-to-head is a really nice base to build on because you can add steals to that mix. And you probably want to pick one other category. My guess would be rebounds would be the next easiest one to try to gather up. You just get a high-scoring rebounder who's good at shooting free throws in your top, 3 rounds. Grab another assist dude, and suddenly you're kind of off to the races in a Trae Young build. Roto, it's not so great because the weak stuff, you have to try to cover up all of it or most of it. Like head-to-head, you can cover up one or two of them. Cover up the weakness in rebounds, cover up a weakness in, I don't know, blocks, turnovers, probably not. Maybe the other stuff. Roto, you want to cover up the weakness in boards, cover up the weakness in blocks, make sure you get enough steals. That you're definitely going to have to do on the head-to-head side as well. Try to cover up the field goal percent. Try to cover up the turnovers. One of those maybe you could let float. But that's why Trae Young is a head-to-head guy. At 11, I'm fine with Trae at head-to-head because you can build on it. Roto, I wouldn't do it. I don't think it's a good start on that side. I'd rather have this dude in Roto, and that's Steph Curry at 12. Head-to-head, I'd rather have Trae Young most likely. Because again, and you guys have probably heard this concept, the -1 ranking board, where you remove a player's worst category. What do they look like now? With Steph, he doesn't really have a one god-awful category. Subpar this last year in steals, blocks, field goal percent, and a little bit in turnovers, but not eliminating any of those didn't move him up or down the board very much. Where with someone like Trae Young, you wipe out the field goal percent issue, and he takes a pretty good flying leap up the board. So give me Steph and Roto at 11. Give me Trae Young in head-to-head at 11. And frankly, I don't want Trae Young even at 12 on the Roto side. He belongs down where he was. You could choose to punt Trae's worst category, which is actually turnovers with 4.4 of them, and he jumps up to number 14. So that's the argument for him in Roto, but now you're stuck probably punting something. If you punt field goal percent, Trae Young jumps into the middle of the second round, which is, again, probably an easier one to pull off. And in head-to-head, you can kind of throw away two categories if you really had to. Roto, you kind of can't. So that's why, for me at least, Trae Young doesn't quite belong on the board just yet. For Roto, sorry, clarification. Donovan Mitchell is at number 13. He slides up the board, as did Steph, by the way. Steph went from 14 to 12. Kevin Durant went from 15 to 10. I forgot to mention that before. That was a big jump up the board. KD went from one of my prime targets to someone that I think is just going in the right spot now. Same story for Steph. I liked him a ton at 14. At 12, I think he's pretty much where he should be going. Donovan Mitchell was borderline target for me. Now he's borderline avoid for me. I like Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, he's terrific if you're punting his worst category, which was field goal or turnovers. We'll kind of ignore turnovers for this discussion. But much like Joel Embiid, you need the health. And Donovan Mitchell played in only 55 games last year. And like we keep talking about how Embiid and AD are these terrifying health risks. Donovan Mitchell missed 27 games this past season, and going backwards, 14, 15, 29. And then you find the 13, which isn't bad. That was that was 3 that year, and it was 19 the year before. Screwed up my games missed there. So the last 4 years for Donovan Mitchell have been not great, a little bit Embiid-like. 14, 15 to 25, somewhere in that neck of the woods. 19, 15, 14, 27. That's the last 4. Working forward that time instead of backward. He got into the 30 range by totals this last year, and if he gets up to 65 games played, he's a win at 13. I don't know that there's a guarantee he gets there. I think it ends up being relatively safe at this spot, but certainly not my favorite if you had any kind of injury risk in the first round. And right behind him, who only shifted a tiny bit, Kyrie Irving, down from 13 to 14. I still don't like him. He was on my avoids board before. He's on my avoids board now. He's Donovan Mitchell with more injury uncertainty. Because Kyrie hasn't come close to playing a full season. Like, at least Donovan Mitchell had a negative 14 in there in games played. Kyrie's last, you got to go all the way back to his Cavs years. 2016, people. That's 8 years ago now. Working backwards, he's missed 24, 22, 53. That one had some other stuff going on. 18, that one was close, actually. That was like at least 75% of games played. That was the good one. That was year 2 in Brooklyn, by the way. Year 1 in Brooklyn, missed 62 games. 52 games. Sorry, math hard. Back with the Celtics, he missed 15 and 22. And then in his last year in Cleveland, he missed only 10. Rough. Kyrie Irving often makes the old man squad. He will not this year. Devin Booker at 15 slides up to probably around where he should have been from 18. He's still a relatively safe second-round pick, but there isn't much in the way of upside on Book anymore. So take him there. That's fine. Anthony Edwards falls. He's a big faller here from 10 down to 16. He was a big avoid guy for me at number 10. I don't mind Anthony Edwards in the second round. I'm still not overly enthused about him. He was number 20 by totals last year because he played in 79 out of 82 damn basketball games. I don't think there's any way he gets up near this mark on a per game side. He's probably a second rounder by totals again this year, which makes him a little bit safer, but probably just someone I'm not going to draft. But I don't hate it anymore. Mid-second round, I don't hate Anthony Edwards the way that I did late first round. And Domantas Sabonis, it's kind of a similar situation. He also dropped 5 slots. Edwards dropped 6. Sabonis is another dude who slides into a much more interesting spot because he played in all 82 games last year and finished at number 12 by totals. If you're looking at the per game side, Sabonis was number 29. Anthony Edwards was I might have said Anthony Davis in there. Anthony Edwards was number 37. So I would rather have Sabonis at this spot. Honestly, he makes more sense for team building because Sabonis is very good at a few things, rebounding and assists and field goal percent. He helps cover up the deficiencies on some of the guard-heavy builds. So like a Trae Young, Domantas Sabonis pairing is pretty good at scoring, pretty good at threes, pretty good at rebounds, very good at assists, meh at steals, can't block, and then pretty good at both percentages. So now you have this like foundation of, okay, well, I want to continue to get scoring and threes and counting stats and steals. I don't have to worry about blocks all that much. I need to make sure that my free throws don't take any other hits. My turnovers are not very good. You kind of lean into a particular build if you don't want to go guard. But Sabonis takes care of those assists, so you don't have to go with another punt field goal guard. Like that would open up competing in field goal percent if you wanted to. I forgot to put him up on the screen for the YouTubers. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry, YouTubers. Let's take a very quick break for a commercial, and then we'll finish things up with our last 7 or 8 names on the board today. At number 18, jumping all the way up from number 25 and remaining one of my preferred picks on the board is James Harden. He eliminates quite a lot. I say like James had something to do with it. Yahoo has eliminated a lot of the per game upside with Harden going in at the end of the second round. I personally thought this year that he could end up with a per game rank around 12 to 15. Well, now you don't have a whole lot of wiggle room there if he doesn't quite get to that mark. But the floor is so obscenely high on Harden. That's one of the biggest reasons that I like him, is that a worst case scenario, barring injury, Dan knocks on wood, a worst case scenario for Harden is like number 25. So getting him at 18, at 25, whatever, still really safe. And there's still a little bit of upside built in. So I still like you, James Harden, even at this slightly higher mark. Lamelo Ball, on the other hand, not as enthusiastic anymore. He's now at 19. He's a big jumper in this new board, especially in the early rounds. Lamelo goes from 29 to 19. He was, in the middle of the third round, a no-brainer because he's a 20-something per game guy, even in 9-cat. And if you're going with the -1, the -1 rank board, where you remove LaMelo's field goal percent, for instance, he jumps up towards the edge of the first round. That's a big buffer against injury risk. Well, now you got to take a mid-second round, which is where he is when you eliminate field goal percent anyway. And now if there's any injury stuff that goes on, you wipe it all out. So this is fine. It's not a disaster spot, but given the injury risk, I think we've wiped out a lot of the upside. Scotty Barnes at number 20 didn't move all that much spot over spot. He went from 23 to 20. He was, I thought, like a relatively safe pick at 23. Becomes a little bit scarier at 20. Not really a guy I'm targeting, despite the fact that he's pretty freaking good at basketball. Scotty Barnes averaged 28 and 6 last year with good defensive stats. Lower percentages. I mean, if he fixes those a tiny bit, if you see a little bit more shot making, perhaps, I don't know how much higher he can climb. I don't know that he's going to fall much beyond like 35 if the assists drop back down or if the blocks come back down at all. So he's a guy that I'm probably not going with. I don't hate him, but if I had to say, like, in my right hand, I hold players that I would like to have or have, in my eyes, a 50-50 shot or better of beating their mark, he's not in it. He's in the left hand. He's in the 50-50 shot or worse of beating the mark. Last 5 names, Jaylen Brunson at number 21, also a very small mover. Brunson from 20 down 1 slot. My opinion does not change. Brunson was like number 12, 13, 14 down the stretch last year when he was taking 26 shots a ball game. He'll be lucky to get to around 20 this year with Randall back and Mikal Bridges in town and the Knicks just having some other offensive options. He's still a main dude, and his percentages are good, and his scoring is going to be good, and the assists are going to be solid. And I mean, the floor is not catastrophic level low, but I do think that there's a chance that Brunson is like near 40 when the team is at full strength, 35, 40 range. So this is just a little bit too early for me to take Jaylen Brunson. Chet Holmgren falls from, what was he, 17 or 18 before? He was 17. He falls to number 22. We talked late last week, Dan Palio, big fan of Chet Holmgren this year. Is not a guy that I'm really aiming for in the second round, but suddenly now at least he's being drafted back of where he finished last year on a per game basis. And I think given the fact that he is a little bit unicorn-like, if anything in his actual basketball game gets better, hopefully that's kind of the buffer against what Isaiah Hartenstein does. But that, of course, is my big fear with Holmgren. If we move him off the 5 to the 4 slot, do blocks take a hit? Do rebounds take a hit? Even if he does more offensively, is that enough to offset? I've got Holmgren as a mid-20s guy this year, so I really didn't like him at 17. I don't mind him at 22, but I'm also kind of trying to avoid taking the guys where, again, with Holmgren, forget the -1 rank board. We kind of need to do like the +1. So what does he look like if you take away his best category? What happens if you're punting blocks and say, okay, he's not going to drop from 2.5 to league average. But if you pull blocks out, Holmgren's just like not even on the board anymore. He falls to number 70. But that's not going to happen. He's not going to fall back to league average. But what if his blocks go from 2.3 to 1.9? He falls probably around to a round and a half. So not really a guy I'm targeting in Chet. But the guy behind him is. I love Damian Lillard. He's still in that same spot. Actually went down 2 pockets from 21 to 23. I love it. Big fan for a number of reasons. Dame, if you're going -1 ranks, he's number 13. Take field goal percent out. Or, in my eyes, I think he has a chance to get a little bit better in field goal percent this year. So the floor, in my eyes, for Lillard is 30. The ceiling is up near the turn. I don't know that he's going to get all the way quite that far, but be able to get him at the end of the second round. And where you have that kind of tight window, he's safe, but there's also a chance he could be better. Big fan. One of my big guys that I'm targeting in this range. 2 names left. Paul George at 24. He was also a little bit of a jumper here, only by 2. 26 to 24. Paul George is someone I'm looking for closer to 30. I think he does take a pretty goodly usage hit in Philadelphia from 17 shots per game. That probably comes down by 1 or 2 field goal attempts. Can he maintain the efficiency he had last year? Can he maintain the health he had last year? This is a fairly safe spot for PG. But when we saw him falling to 30, that was a spot where I think a lot of us were like, yeah, I mean, I'll take Paul George at 30. At 24, call it safe. This is safe on PG. And finally, DeAaron Fox at pick 25. Yeah, that's fine. I think he'll, I think we're going to see a little bit of a drop-off for Fox. He was number 25 last year with no DeRozan around. So expect the field goal attempts to come down a little bit. I don't know. Maybe the steals, do they hold at 2? That's a big number to try to replicate. I would assume that with Fox, the more likely, and again, this is all playing the percentages, more than likely, things get worse and not better from a fantasy standpoint. Meaning 25 and 9 cat is probably the absolute best case scenario, but he is also the main guard punt free throw target in this part of the board. So if you have Giannis, you're probably taking Fox in the middle of the second round, or LeBron. He's probably not getting back to you in the middle of the third round. One of those guys is going to be coming off the board. And if you're punting free throws, he was number 13 last year. So Fox is going to go in this range because someone's going to be punting free throws, and that's where they're going to take him, and that'll be totally reasonable. If you are not punting free throws, he's fine here at 25, but he's not my favorite. He's again, probably loses to this mark on the per game side, but also probably not by all that much. Recap. It's the recap part of the show where I will take the board off and I will put my face on instead. Heaven help you all. Heaven help you all indeed. The players that I like, and there aren't as many anymore. I think there are 3 guys that have a really nice shot to beat their mark both per game and totals. That's the way I'm trying to classify this. And those guys are Anthony Davis, because he should be able to beat his mark at 9 per game pretty easily. And so if he gets to 68, 69 games played, he'll crush his mark by totals as well. James Harden at 18, I think beats his mark per game. That'll be a tighter squeeze, but by totals, I have enough faith in him. And then Damian Lillard, tougher one to beat it on both. I think per game, barely. Dame could get up to like 20, 21, something in that neck of the woods. But again, if there's some health there, he has a great shot to beat it on both ways by a half round or something to that event. There are a number of guys in this 25 that I think beat their mark either one way or the other, like Embiid. Per game, yes. Totals, tough. And that's why it makes it hard to put those guys on the board. You know, Steph, maybe. Donovan Mitchell, probably per game. Totals, Paul George, maybe. And exclude the guys at the very top of the board as well. Tatum, totals, perhaps. Per game, no. And that's why I sort of landed on the 3 I did. Anthony Davis, James Harden, and Damian Lillard. And there are 2 guys in this mix that I think have a very hard shot at beating their mark in both. Meaning, I feel like there's almost no chance they do it on both sides. Those are Kyrie Irving, who probably does beat it per game, but I don't think beats it by totals. And Jaylen Brunson, who has a shot to maybe beat it by totals, but I don't think has any shot to do it on the per game side. And then everybody else, in my eyes, has some chance to beat their mark. Again, excluding basically like the top 4, because it's impossible to beat your mark up in that range, of beating on one way or the other. Minus the punt dudes. So Giannis, Trae Young are punt guys. LaMelo is kind of a punt guy, not entirely. Those are the ones. Those are your punt guys. So if you take those out of the mix, everybody else has a shot to beat it one way or the other. You could probably take Halliburton out also. Say he'll have a really, really tough time beating the 5 pre-rank on either per game or totals. But I'm trying to be nice to the guys at the top of the board because it's freaking impossible for any of those guys to beat their stuff. But look at everybody else. Tatum, maybe totals. Durant, maybe both. Steph, maybe both. Donovan Mitchell, per game, definitely. Totals, maybe. Booker, per game, probably not. Totals, maybe, yeah. Anthony Edwards, per game, hell no. Totals, outside shot. Sabonis, per game, no. Totals, yes. But again, that's my methodology for coming up with the ones that I like the most. It's the guys that I think have a good shot to beat it in both. And the ones that I don't like are the ones that I think have almost no shot to beat it in both. For some reason, one reason or another. Thanks for watching, everybody. This was the brand new Yahoo Top 25. The new board, it is here. Please follow on Twitter at Dan Vespers and at Old Man Squad. On the way out, take a second. Hit that like button. It's right there. It's so easy. Just do it. And subscribe. Again, if you've been enjoying everything we've putting together here, we're trying to keep you guys ready no matter when your draft is happening, especially if it's coming up soon. And if not, we get to talk through these players because it's freaking fun. And there's new things to discuss on them when they move on the board. Because certain issues that they had, you were unwilling to overlook when they're at, 10, but you're willing to overlook them when they're at 16 or 17. And flip it, vice versa. Please drop a 5-star review if you're enjoying it, and subscribe and all that good stuff. And we'll be back with you guys again tomorrow, Wednesday's schedule here on the show. We're talking to Matt Lawson about the new board. We'll also get into some Dynasty stuff as well, because dude's Twitter handle is NBA Dynasty ADP. The guy knows Dynasty. It's true. And mock draft. Actually, I think we're going to have Adam King on that show. I think we'll be mocking with Adam tomorrow. And I think there's an episode of Between Two Dans tomorrow. Ooh, Wednesday's going to be busy. My voice may not survive. But you know what? All in the name of fantasy basketball podcasting. And with that, I bid you adieu. See you guys tomorrow, everybody.